She leaned in, stopped halfway, and scratched her nose instead. That's when I knew she wasn't going to kiss me. Not now. Not ever again. No big announcement. No breakup speech. Just that tiny, casual dodge, like I was a mosquito in her space. She stood there in the entryway, holding her keys like she had somewhere better to be. I stood there like an idiot with my lips slightly parted, pretending I was mid-yawn so she wouldn't notice I was aiming for her mouth. "You good?" she asked, not looking up. I nodded. She walked off. The silence that followed was dense. Not dramatic. Just heavy, like wet laundry. I didn't follow her. Didn't ask where she was going. I just stood there with my hand on the doorknob, wondering when exactly I stopped being someone she missed and started being someone she avoided. I couldn't tell you the exact moment it happened. Maybe it was the day I bought us those matching mugs and she rolled her eyes. Or maybe when I made her a playlist and she said, "You still do stuff like this." The little signs were all over the place. I just ignored them because hope is louder than reality when you're in love. At least, it was for me. By the next morning, I had made a decision, not a bold one, not a brave one. I just didn't say anything. At all. Not a word. Not a question. Not a sound. I didn't even react when she slammed the fridge door 3 times looking for almond milk, which I always bought. I didn't look up when she muttered something about this house being weird lately. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson. I honestly didn't even know what I was doing. But the second I stopped engaging, something shifted. And she felt it. By day 3, she started looking at me like I was a ghost in my own house. She'd hover behind me, like she was about to say something, then back off. She made me coffee one morning and left it on the table without a word. I didn't touch it. She left 2 sugar packets beside it. I used to take one. That morning, I stirred in both, loudly, and walked away. It sounds ridiculous, but silence was the only way I had left to be noticed. And then, it worked too well. That night, I walked past the bedroom and heard her whispering on the phone. The door wasn't fully closed. My name came up. Twice. I don't know what's wrong with him. He's not even trying anymore. It's like he found something. There was a pause. Then a laugh. Then, "No, of course he doesn't know about you." My chest went cold. And still, I said nothing. She stepped out of the room and flinched when she saw me standing there. I didn't look angry. Just tired. She opened her mouth. I walked past her. She didn't sleep that night. That night, I lay awake on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my screen was black. I wasn't checking messages. I wasn't reading the news. I was just listening. Every floorboard in that house had something to say, and I knew them all by heart. I could tell when she stepped into the hallway and paused, just long enough to see if I'd notice. I didn't. I heard her open the fridge, slam it shut. She wasn't hungry. She was pacing, trying to provoke something. A reaction. A word. Anything. But I had nothing left to give. Because whatever was broken between us, she broke it with silence, with dodging my kisses, with whispers behind doors that used to stay open. The next morning, she stood in the doorway while I was tying my shoes. I didn't look up. I could feel her eyes burning into me, waiting for me to ask the same question I always asked. "Need anything today?" But I didn't. I stood, slid my keys into my jacket pocket, and stepped past her like she was part of the furniture. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she didn't. She let me leave in silence. I knew she'd be texting someone before the front door even closed. I didn't need to check her phone to know who. I drove nowhere in particular that day. Just wandered. Parked outside an old bookstore. Got a black coffee I didn't drink. Sat with the engine running and stared at the empty passenger seat like it used to mean something. I tried to figure out where everything changed. Was it gradual? Was it that party we went to 3 months ago where she laughed just a little too hard at another man's joke? Was it when she started using phrases like my space and my timeline? It wasn't just about the kiss. That kiss was a symptom. The disease had been crawling through our marriage for a while. I'd just been too loyal, too desperate, too pathetic to notice. When I got home, her car was gone. I didn't ask where she was. Didn't text. Didn't care. But I did check something. The hallway drawer. The one with our important documents. Passports. Birth certificates. Marriage license. And there it was missing. Not all of it. Just hers. Her passport. Her birth certificate. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something told me she was preparing for an exit. Or a trip. A secret one. Without me. That night, she came home after midnight. Hair curled. Perfume still fresh. She tried to be quiet, tiptoeing in like a teenager sneaking past curfew. But I was sitting in the dark at the kitchen table, drinking that same black coffee from earlier. Cold now. Bitter. She froze when she saw me. Didn't think you'd be up, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't answer. Just looked at her neck, where a faint red mark was peeking out from under her scarf. She caught me looking. Her hand flew up like lightning, pulling the scarf tighter. What? She asked. I shrugged. You missed a spot. She flinched. It's just from my sweater. I had it on all day. I stood slowly, poured the rest of the coffee down the sink, and turned to leave the kitchen. Sure, I muttered, not because I believed her, but because I wanted her to hear the sound of doubt, and maybe feel a fraction of the rot I'd been living with. That night, she tried to get into bed beside me. I was already pretending to be asleep on the edge, back turned to her. No movement. No breathing deep enough to seem fake. She lay there for a while, maybe staring at the ceiling, maybe scrolling through lies. I didn't care. But I heard her sniffle once. Then twice. She was crying quietly. Probably not for me. Maybe not even for guilt. Maybe just because she realized she had no idea what I knew or when I'd explode. But I wasn't going to explode. I was going to disappear. Not physically. Not yet. But emotionally, mentally, piece by piece. And let her feel the slow erosion she'd started without even realizing it. She had stopped kissing me. Now I was going to make her miss my silence more than she ever missed my voice. The following day, she texted me. That in itself was unusual. We lived in the same house. We shared the same air. But instead of facing me, she sent a message. Hey, can we talk later tonight? I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I just locked the phone and left it face down on the kitchen counter where she would eventually see it, unopened, like an ignored confession. I wasn't playing games, at least. I didn't start this as a game. But something about her sudden interest in talking after days of my silence told me everything I needed to know. She was scared. She cooked dinner that night. Set the table for two. Lit a candle. Real ones, we hadn't used those since our 3rd anniversary. I came home late on purpose. When I walked through the door, I saw her there, dressed in the same navy sweater she wore on our honeymoon flight. Her hair was done. Her eyes looked hopeful in a way that almost made me soften. Almost. But then I looked at the table. Chicken marsala. My favorite. Except she hadn't made it in months. Probably forgot how I even liked it. I could smell the panic in her effort. I sat down across from her without a word. She placed a plate in front of me, watching for any hint of gratitude. I didn't look at her. I cut into the food slowly, chewed mechanically, and swallowed the guilt building in my throat. She finally broke the silence. I don't know what's going on with us, she said softly. But I miss you. Her voice cracked a little on that last word, like it cost her something to admit it. I kept eating. Then came the second blow, delivered without grace, without build-up. Are you seeing someone? I nearly choked. The question was so far from reality it was almost funny. Me? Seeing someone? When I could barely look in the mirror without asking where I went wrong. When every ounce of my emotional energy had been spent just surviving her cold shoulder for the past year. I shook my head once. No words. She looked relieved. Almost too relieved. Like she needed me to be clean so her mess could stay hidden. She leaned forward. Then why are you acting like this? I looked at her for the first time in days. Really looked. And I realized something brutal. I didn't recognize her. Her face was the same. Her hands were the same. But her energy, her warmth, was gone. It wasn't absence. It was abandonment wrapped in routine. I'm not acting, I said finally, and my voice came out like gravel. This is just what happens when I stop pretending you still love me. She blinked hard. Don't say that. That's not fair. Fair? The word hit me like a slap. Fair was me planning weekend getaways while she made excuses about deadlines. Fair was me massaging her shoulders while she texted someone else in bed beside me. Fair was me trying every day, kissing her every night, only to be met with that same indifferent mouth that used to taste like home. I saw your passport was gone, I said quietly. She froze. And your phone the other night, I added. The one you thought I didn't hear. She pushed back from the table. You were spying on me? No, I said. You were hiding in plain sight. The silence that followed was colder than any couch I'd slept on. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain. She just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes glossy. I thought she might yell, scream, lie. But she didn't. She just turned and walked into the bedroom. She locked the door behind her. Later that night, I heard her crying again. The kind of cry you try to bury in pillows. Deep, ugly sobs. And for a split second, my chest twisted with guilt. Because no matter how far we'd fallen, I'd once loved that sound when it came from laughter. But I stayed silent, because this was no longer about saving us. This was about making her feel the absence she had crafted with her own hands. She had killed the man who used to bring her flowers and open her car door. Now she was stuck with the one who stopped kissing back. And she didn't know what to do with him. The lock on our bedroom door clicked open around 3:12 a.m. I wasn't asleep. I hadn't slept in that bed for a week, but I heard every sound in that house like I was wired into its bones. She walked down the hallway slowly, trying not to wake me, unaware I was already sitting upright on the couch, staring blankly at the dark TV screen. I didn't move, didn't speak. Just listened as her footsteps retreated toward the kitchen, where she opened the fridge, closed it, then stood in silence. I could picture her standing there, one hand on the counter, the other probably gripping the edge of the sink like she was about to break down again. She thought silence was punishment. Now she was learning it's also a mirror. In the morning, she was already awake, dressed, hair curled again. She wore the gold earrings I bought her 6 birthdays ago, the same ones she said were too flashy for work. She sat at the table with her phone face down and a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. Her eyes flicked up when I walked in, and she smiled, but it didn't touch her face. I thought maybe we could talk now, she said, as if last night hadn't happened. As if I hadn't just called out her infidelity with surgical precision and she hadn't locked herself away like a coward. I poured myself some cereal, sat across from her, but didn't speak. I watched her carefully, the way you might watch someone who'd already betrayed you but was still holding a knife behind their back. She took a shaky breath. It wasn't serious. My spoon froze midair. She didn't need to clarify. The fact that she opened with that sentence was her version of a confession. I hadn't even asked. I didn't mean for it to happen, she continued. It started as texts. Just talking. He understood things I couldn't say to you. There it was. That self-righteous undertone. Like I was to blame for not knowing the conversations she never tried to have. Like her betrayal was my burden to carry because I hadn't read her mind. He's married, she added. It was never supposed to be real. I scoffed before I could stop myself. You hid your passport for something that wasn't real? She flinched. It was just a plan. A stupid one. We thought about meeting in New Orleans. Just for a weekend. No one would have known. I put the spoon down and looked her dead in the eye. But I knew. She looked away. Not until I screwed up. That hit harder than I expected. Not until she screwed up. Not until she got caught. Not until my silence made her believe I was suspicious. Which meant, in her mind, she was careful. Calculated. She thought she was smarter than me. She thought I wouldn't notice the missing intimacy, the distant stares, the fake smiles. I wondered how many nights I sat beside her while she texted him under the table. How many weekends I spent cleaning the garage or fixing the leaky faucet while she fantasized about a man she'd never bring home. I finally said something I hadn't planned. Do you still talk to him? Her face tensed. No. You're lying. She swallowed. Hard. I blocked him. I swear. Last night. It sounded rehearsed. Like she had practiced it in the mirror. I didn't call her out on it. I just nodded slowly and stood up. She reached across the table, touched my hand for the first time in what felt like months. Her fingers were cold. Desperate. I don't want to lose you, she said quietly. You already did, I replied. I left the house. Not for work. Not for errands. I just drove. Drove for hours. I ended up in an old parking lot behind the high school we both attended. The same one where we shared our first kiss. Where we once made plans under the bleachers for what our life would look like. She wanted 2 kids. I wanted a dog. We compromised with one of each. Funny how none of that ever happened. We got a mortgage instead. And routines. And silence. That evening, when I returned, her car was gone again. But this time, her phone was still home. Left carelessly on the kitchen counter, just like mine had been days before. Except she hadn't turned hers off. She'd just forgotten it. Or maybe, deep down, she wanted me to look. I didn't plan to. Truly, I didn't. But the screen lit up while I stood there. A new message appeared. No name, just a number. It read, "She doesn't suspect. You can still make the trip." I felt a strange stillness wash over me. Cold. Clear. That message wasn't meant for her. It was from her. And it wasn't recent. It was sent 2 weeks ago. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that screen, reading those words over and over. She doesn't suspect. You can still make the trip. They burned through my brain like acid. It wasn't just the content of the message, it was the timestamp. 2 weeks ago. Which meant while I was still trying to kiss her goodnight, still making her tea in the mornings, still believing that maybe she was just tired or overwhelmed. She was out there telling someone else that I was clueless, that I didn't suspect, that I was just some boring man with a big heart and small questions. I guess that's all I ever was to her, a place to be safe while she planned where she'd rather be. I didn't take a screenshot. I didn't forward the message. I didn't touch her phone again. I just placed it gently back where I found it, the way you set down something fragile that no longer belongs to you. And then I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret it either. I went into the spare room, the one we barely used, the one that still had boxes from our last move. I opened the bottom drawer of the old nightstand and pulled out the dusty laptop I hadn't touched in almost a year. Back when we still shared passwords, before things went cold, she had once used my laptop to sign into her email. And clearly, she never signed out. The inbox loaded slowly, as if the internet itself was trying to spare me. And then it appeared, a string of messages, most under an alias. But she wasn't smart enough to hide the way she spoke. I know her voice. I know the way she uses ellipses when she's being flirtatious. I know how she double spaces when she's nervous. I know how she says you're wild when she's pushing boundaries. She had used all of those tells. I didn't have to dig far. Just 3 emails down was one with a subject line that read, "Flights booked, see you soon." I felt my stomach flip. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the precision, the planning. She had used a different card, one I never knew existed. A separate bank account. She created a whole second life while I was trying to save the first one. There was an attachment, a PDF of the itinerary. I opened it, half expecting it to be fake. But it wasn't. A round-trip flight to Atlanta. Departing next weekend. 3 nights in a boutique hotel downtown. 2 names on the reservation. One of them was hers. The other? I recognized immediately. Brian Colson. He was the one she always referred to as just a former coworker. The guy who was a bit too flirty, but was harmless. The guy who liked all her posts but never commented. The guy whose name she once muttered in her sleep and swore it was just a dream. That was over a year ago. And now here he was, on her calendar, on her mind, in her bed in just a few days. I shut the laptop gently. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, legs numb, ears ringing, heart pacing like it was trying to outrun itself. That night, she came home with groceries. Smiled at me. "I thought I'd make your favorite tonight, Parmesan risotto," she said like she hadn't already packed her emotional bags and printed the boarding pass. I nodded. Sounds good. I even helped her unpack. I even complimented her perfume. I even opened a bottle of wine. Because now I wasn't the fool anymore. Now she didn't suspect. I watched her move around the kitchen, humming softly like she used to when she was happy. Like we were normal. Like we were still a team. And I wondered how many times she had played this exact scene for me while texting him behind her back. She kissed me on the cheek while passing me the pepper shaker. The same lips that flinched from mine now tried to act natural. She kissed me. For the first time in what felt like months. But not out of love. Out of guilt. That night, I went into the garage and started sorting boxes. Not out of boredom. Out of purpose. I found my old safe. Inside it, a dusty brown envelope I hadn't touched in years, my inheritance from my uncle. Something I never told her about. She always thought we used every cent to buy the house. She never knew I kept a portion aside. Quiet money. Just in case life ever stopped making sense. And now it had. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I lay there on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning so slowly it looked like it might stop any second. Like it, too, had finally run out of energy pretending everything was fine. I heard her breathing in the next room, light and steady. Peaceful, even. That kind of peace doesn't come from love. It comes from knowing the storm hasn't hit yet. She had no clue that I'd already read everything, seen everything. That I knew about the hotel in Atlanta, the fake Gmail account, the spare debit card, the friend who was waiting to meet her with champagne and a weekend full of lies. She still believed she had the upper hand. But that belief was about to become the final thing she'd lose. The next morning, I got up early and left before she could even roll over. I didn't leave a note. Didn't say where I was going. I knew if she texted, she'd try to be casual. "Where'd you head off to this morning, babe?" As if everything wasn't burning. And she did text, exactly at 9:03 a.m. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. I was standing in a quiet office 3 towns over, sitting across from a woman named Rachel who looked like she'd seen my kind before. Pale, hollow-eyed, and done. She was a divorce attorney. A discreet one. She listened patiently while I explained things I never thought I'd say out loud. About how my wife had started disappearing emotionally long before she planned a real-life getaway. About the silence, the missing kisses, the secret messages. I showed her the emails, the reservation, the proof. I had it all. Rachel leaned back in her chair, glanced at the file I handed over, and gave me a single nod. "You've got a solid case," she said. "You want to serve her before or after the trip?" That was the first time I smiled in weeks. "After," I said. Let her believe in the fantasy a little longer. I spent the next few days building my exit like a man rigging a ship to quietly float away in the night. I moved funds, canceled our joint credit card without a word, redirected my direct deposit, took her name off the emergency contacts at work. I started boxing up the things that were mine and only mine. Yearbooks, my late mother's jewelry, the leather-bound journals I kept hidden behind the bookshelves, the small but meaningful items that didn't scream value but meant everything to me. She never noticed. Not once. Because her head was already in another city, another bed. On Thursday night, 2 days before her flight, she came home glowing. I swear she had the nerve to glow. She had her nails done, hair blown out, a new dress bag from some boutique I didn't recognize. She set it down like it was just another day, kissed me, actually kissed me, and said, "I was thinking we should take a trip soon. Just the two of us. Reconnect." It was so absurd, I nearly burst out laughing right there in the kitchen. I bit the inside of my cheek instead. I told her, "Yeah, maybe we should." And she lit up like I'd handed her a pardon from guilt. I watched her float around the room like a teenager playing pretend, unaware the walls she'd built on lies were about to cave in. Friday night, the night before her departure, I gave her space. Told her I had a work emergency and would be in the garage for a few hours. She didn't ask questions. She was too busy packing for her fantasy weekend with the man she thought she'd outsmarted me for. But while she folded lingerie and zipped boots into her suitcase, I sat in the garage, typing up the final version of the letter she'd find after she got back, or maybe even sooner, depending on how cruel I felt when the time came. It wasn't a hate letter. It wasn't full of anger. It was empty, like me. It listed everything she'd done in sequence, every message, every lie, every moment she mistook my kindness for weakness. It explained how long I'd known. It listed the date I moved half of our assets into a separate account. It noted the day I filed the petition. And at the bottom, printed cleanly on its own page, was the sentence that I wanted to be the last thing she'd remember from me. "You stopped kissing me, so I stopped speaking. You should have paid more attention to the silence." I printed 3 copies, one for her, one for my lawyer, and one for myself, because I knew in the years to come, I might need proof that I wasn't crazy, that this all really happened, that she broke it, not me. When I walked back into the house that night, she was asleep, curled in the center of the bed like a woman without a care in the world. Her suitcase stood by the door. I stared at it for a while, at the tag that said Elena C. in her perfect handwriting. I thought about opening it, just to see what she packed, but I didn't. I didn't need to. She'd already unpacked everything that mattered the second she pulled away from our last kiss. The morning of her flight felt strangely quiet, almost too controlled. She moved around the house like a dancer rehearsing her final performance, carefully measured, smile polished, voice light and airy like nothing in the world was wrong. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee and watching her pack the last of her things into that sleek, navy suitcase. She hummed while zipping compartments, tapping her phone as if checking work emails, but I already knew the boarding pass was sitting in her inbox, right beside half a dozen unread, "Can't wait to see you" messages from the man she once claimed was barely a friend. Brian Colson, the same guy whose last name I had to Google to even remember where she knew him from. The man I now knew better than I ever wanted to. She came up behind me around 8:10 a.m., kissed the top of my head like I was her loyal golden retriever, and said, "Don't miss me too much, okay? Just a quick girls' weekend. You'll barely notice I'm gone." I nodded without looking up. I knew if I saw her face, I might say something I hadn't planned. I might break the act too soon. But I stayed still, let her believe the lie. Let her walk into her own mess. She left at 8:24. I waited until her car disappeared down the street. Then I stood up, finished my coffee in silence, and went to the bedroom. Her side of the bed was still warm. I stared at the empty space, then opened her closet and removed the sealed envelope I'd tucked behind the third shelf. The one with the letter, the photocopies of the messages, the flight booking, and the printed email thread where she told Brian that I was emotionally dense and duller than hospital walls. That part stung more than the cheating, honestly. It made me realize how long she'd been rewriting me in her head. How easy it was for her to reduce years of love, fights, healing, and compromise into a few cruel metaphors she shared with another man. I left the envelope on her pillow. I made the bed around it, neat and crisp, like a present waiting for her return. And I didn't stop there. While she was still somewhere over the clouds heading to Atlanta, I began the final act. I sent a brief email to our mutual friends letting them know Elena and I were taking time apart. I notified her employer, where I was still listed as her emergency contact, that she would not be reachable for the next several days due to unforeseen personal issues. And then, I logged into our shared photo storage account, the one she forgot we both had access to, and downloaded every single picture she had secretly saved of Brian. Some selfies, some screenshots of messages, one of them an image of his chest and abs that made me feel physically sick. I didn't confront her with them. I just saved them in a folder titled Closure and backed it up on a drive I locked away in the safe. By the time she landed, I had already packed half the house. My half. My books, tools, clothes, documents, laptop, and the framed photo of my dad that used to sit on the hallway shelf. I didn't leave a mess. I didn't break anything. I just removed every piece of myself like I was never there. That evening, while she and Brian checked into the hotel, I was checking into a temporary apartment in another part of the city. Nothing fancy. One bedroom. Clean walls. No memories. It felt like a detox chamber, quiet, cold, and necessary. I turned off my phone, opened a cheap beer, and sat on the couch staring at the ceiling. I had no desire to track her, spy on her, or wonder how many lies she was spinning. I already knew how the weekend would go. They'd laugh, drink, pretend their affair was romantic instead of rotten. She'd take selfies with him in low lighting, careful not to tag locations. They'd share inside jokes about me, about how I was clueless or boring or too soft to ever take a stand. But what she didn't know was that the stand had already been taken. And then Sunday night came, and she called. I hadn't expected that. She called 6 times. No voicemail, no texts, just frantic rings. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and for a moment, I wondered what had gone wrong. Had they fought? Had he left her? Did the reality of it all feel less magical than the fantasy? On the 7th call, I picked up. There was a pause. Then her voice came in, shaken and raw. Where are you? I didn't answer. Gordon, I don't know what's going on. I got back to the hotel room after dinner, and everything was gone. He left. Just vanished. His number's disconnected. The front desk said he checked out hours ago. What the hell is happening? I still didn't speak. I wanted to see where she'd take it. Her breath hitched. Did you do something? That's when I finally said, calmly and clearly, no. He just saw the same version of you I did. Then I hung up. She didn't call again that night. Not once. No texts. No emails. Nothing. The silence that followed was louder than anything she'd said in the past 6 months. For the first time since all of this began, I slept. Not just closed my eyes. I truly slept. 8 hours, uninterrupted, dreamless. Like something heavy had finally been lifted off my chest. When I woke up the next morning, the sun pouring in through the blinds of my small new apartment felt like a new language. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, brewed a fresh pot of coffee without thinking about who else might want some, and sat on the balcony in a hoodie and socks, watching the world go on without her. At noon, my lawyer called. The petition was accepted, filed. Elena would be served the papers by the end of the week. I asked if I needed to be there. She said no. I smiled. That was all I needed. And then, around 3:30 that afternoon, the message came in. Short, awkward, almost childlike in tone. Please, can we talk? Just once. Please. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it until hours later. And when I did, I didn't feel anger. Just clarity. It was done. She had made her choice long before that hotel room. Long before the suitcase. Long before she stopped kissing me and started calling someone else an escape. I had just finally caught up to the truth. The next few weeks were strangely quiet, but I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I took long walks without a destination. I joined a gym. I reconnected with my brother, who I'd pushed away because Elena never liked his sense of humor. I even signed up for a weekend woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to try, but she'd once dismissed with, "You'll just clutter the garage with unfinished projects." Most importantly, I started talking again. Not to her. Not about her. Just to people. To myself. I let my own voice back into the world, the one she had slowly erased with indifference and dismissal. And in that space, I met someone. Not romantically. Not yet. But there was this woman in the woodworking class, Sophie, who laughed too loud and told stories with her hands. She was kind. Messy. Completely unfiltered. And when I handed her a crooked birdhouse I had ruined halfway through construction, she didn't mock me. She smiled and said, "You gave it character." I hadn't realized until then how long it had been since someone saw value in something broken. Weeks turned into months. Elena signed the papers without protest. No arguments. No dramatic emails. Just a quiet, tired scribble of her name and a last, vague message. I wish I'd understood what I had before I threw it away. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent that afternoon in the garage of my new rental home, sanding down a rough piece of pine. I had just started a new project, a bench for the garden I was building out back. Not because anyone asked for it. Not because I needed to prove anything. But because I finally remembered what it felt like to build something with my own hands, and mean it. The silence I once feared had become something else entirely. Peace. And in that peace, I found the version of myself I thought she had taken with her. But he'd been there all along, waiting for me to stop chasing someone who had stopped choosing me.